Minneapolis, St. Paul, Bloomington generate the vast majority of sales tax revenues that fuel this state, and quite frankly fund the suburban and exurban and outstate services. But those communities are constantly hit on for costing the most. Is there any potential of actually doing a real overhaul of our funding system and saying, okay, cities, 2% of your sales tax goes to the state, or any city, and the rest of it stays within your city, so that cities like Minneapolis that have the Target Center, that have the University of Minnesota, there are huge costs that are associated with us having all those students here, that have the major medical facilities with people coming in from outstate, that have the additional police and fire protection that's needed because we are a statewide resource, that we could use those sales tax dollars then and not so unduly burden our citizens and property owners to fund those state resource services.
Well, I'd say I am open to increasing sales taxes for supporting local governments, but quite honestly, the proposal I'm more interested in is one that Representative Paul Marquardt brought up forward a couple of years ago, which would have done it for counties, and it actually works much better for counties. Because as a replacement for local government aid and things like that, there's too many regional centers that really, their sales tax isn't generated by their residents. It's generated from people from the surrounding area coming in and shopping in those places. And yet they still have needs. And it tends to, it also is a very fluctuating revenue source. It's worse than being on the LGA ride with the legislature because people stop buying when the economy chills. And so I really worry about getting local governments too dependent on something that will be even more unpredictable. And the buyers are fickle. You know, it used to be going downtown to shop was just a wonderful thing to do and a great outing, and now we can't hardly keep a retail store open in much of downtown. And we're more of an employment zone. I was just talking to a worker, someone I work with in the county who lives in Bloomington, and he said, why would I ever shop in Minneapolis? I've got within 15 minutes of me Southdale, the Mega Mall, Eden Prairie Center, whatever, and he just hops on one of those express buses and goes back and forth and doesn't really contribute to our economy at all, except as an employer that fills out our workplace. And so I think it gets a little tricky to say, is our history going to be our future? And where with county services, they tend to be a lot more stable. Now, I can tell you that the counties were not excited about that concept, and it's a cautionary tale. Apparently, back in the 90s, counties were given a local option sales tax. But if they didn't pass it, all of their cities would lose 10% of their local government aid, and the county would lose a major chunk of its county program aid. So they kind of had a gun to their head. And so all the counties passed it, surprise, surprise, and it was supposed to be dedicated to support local services. And what happened was the legislature a few years later disconnected that dedication, and so they felt like they were snookered, and they just provided political cover for an increase in the sales tax. And so so there's some real nervousness about doing that. I do think that we need a new Minnesota miracle that is something like what we did in '71, and I don't like to use the word miracle around budgets anymore, but that's what it was known by back then, even though I'd like to have a miracle. But what it was is that we totally redid all of our financing of schools, of cities, of counties, and the state, and rebalanced it. And we are way overdue for that. And we made things a lot more equitable, and we need to do that in all areas. Our schools, it's absolutely ridiculous. If we're running schools on voter-approved levies, and areas that have a lot of poor people who have been laid off and can't pass a levy for the life of them, their schools are just not offering anything, and that's not fair. We should offer every child, no matter where they live, a quality education, and we shouldn't allow some suburban districts to have an education and facilities that are, 5 times the offerings that are offered in other school districts. And so I think we really do need to really look at what should be a level playing floor, and how do we accommodate regional centers for those extra burdens that you outlined, Susan? Part of the challenge in getting any empathy for our special burdens is we've begged for some of them, or at least our official city government has, and there's been an implication that it would create wonderful things for our community. And I mean, the Twin Stadium, people think that's a wonderful new resource, and if you're a ball fan, I hear it's just a wonderful thing if it's a nice sunny day. And people think Minneapolis is making a ton of money because that's success. We aren't.
That's a Hennepin County gig. Hennepin County is torqued at the city of Minneapolis because the county believes that the Minneapolis did not put enough money into that stadium.
Well, besides the local government arguments back and forth, the issue from the legislators, though, perspective is most legislators believe Minneapolis is making a ton of money on it, and that and we are getting a few $1 million in entertainment tax receipts we would not have gotten. Okay, does that fully cover the additional traffic and police and whatever? But did our city leaders present that as a burden? Our city right now communicating to people what a burden an 8-season-a-year Viking stadium might be. 8 games a year, maybe you could get up to 10, plus some high school and college baseball games. That would take, now we've got a pretty compact stadium right now, and as you can tell, over 25 years, it has spun off no excess development, okay? It hasn't been a magnet for anything. And not even a bar. I mean, Huber's was supported half by the hospital across the street, and the fact that there's nothing else in that area.
Those people have reason to drink.
And so, if the new style of stadium is a major campus that's going to be 3 or 4 blocks. That's 3 or 4 downtown blocks less of tax base. It just, but we don't get any analysis of that. I mean, I am willing to step up, and I've gotten out my convention center file to fight the rating of the funding that funds the convention center. And that's the most popular revenue stream other than gambling right now for a stadium. I was able to get our local option sales tax. We have a half-cent sales tax that just goes to Minneapolis. St. Paul has one. Duluth has one of 1 cent that isn't even dedicated to anything but whatever they decide. They've got the best advantage system. But they did it decades before anyone else. And St. Paul has theirs where about half of it goes to major facilities in their area, and the other half goes to their STAR program, which goes to their district councils, which are kind of like our neighborhoods, except they're bigger. And half of it goes to redevelopment and arts. And so it's helping regenerate and revitalize their city. In Minneapolis, our half-cent sales tax goes to pay for the convention center that fills the hotels in St. Paul and Roseville and Bloomington because it was designed to a national convention scale, which would have enough attendees that we don't have the hotel rooms in Minneapolis to accommodate. And so, and our local half-cent sales tax then does nothing for our neighborhoods, for services on our main streets. And so I've always wanted to get us to the St. Paul option, but we've got this debt on the convention center. Now the convention center people, I think, have plans to use that forever and ever by upgrading and creating new things and bells and whistles. But I at least got it in law that when that isn't needed for the existing debt service, it would be dedicated to revitalization of our neighborhoods in downtown. So it is already dedicated when this comes off.
There will be a city council study session about the convention center in the near future. And if you get on the city's website, you can watch that online. But those legislators also need to realize that Twin Stadium and all the sales tax money, it goes back to Evelyn and southwestern Minnesota and other places.
I don't think that we should say everybody for themselves and that, some small town in Minnesota that has no tax base just can't offer anything and we're not going to step up to help them in their schools. I think we have to look at having everyone in Minnesota be successful and that will cannibalize our own if we get too much into us versus them but we still have to recognize unique needs and burdens of areas that we ask to step up in other ways. And so I think that has to be part of the debate. I've been hesitant about how much of our city's political chips get diverted into being advocacy for statewide resources instead of advocacy for unique Minneapolis challenges and programs. You know, the new Guthrie is beautiful, and the new Walker is beautiful, and there's lots of things but they serve primarily a suburban and exurban clientele, I suspect, more than people who live in the city, or at least it's balanced. And we need to be talking about our own needs as well.
Diane, I was just going to ask, am I correct historically that what you called property tax, I believe here the 9%, that's LGA?
It's a combination of local government aid, county program aid, and the refunds to individual property tax owners. The property tax refunds are a significant part of that as well.
But that money, that what you were calling the Minnesota Miracle, which was the old redistribution, that's sort of the remnant of it, isn't it?
It is, and it's also buried in our school formulas, so part of the education funding is part of that. But yeah, our legacy of that was we really thrived as a state. If you look at our history over the last 30 years since that happened, we outperformed the nation consistently on employment, on wage levels, on graduation rates in schools and whatever. But we can't rest on our laurels because in the last 5 to 10 years, we're slipping, and we are no longer a nation leader on many of the things that we were. And I think it's because we haven't paid attention to that.
And you tie that connected pretty directly to the old formula being
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, that's where, you know, Governor Wendy Anderson, I think, was the last governor we elected on a policy platform. It's been personality since. But Governor Wendy Anderson, maybe he got personality too. He's pretty handsome back then. He just came off the Olympics hockey team. But he ran on the quality of a child's education shouldn't depend on the property tax base where they happen to be born. And that just resonated. Why should a kid who happens to be born in Fulda or Minneapolis have a crummier education than Edina was seen as the richest part of Minnesota, so it was Edina was, and they had the contrast in electives and you know class size and everything else. And I think we need to go back to that because quite honestly, we don't have equal opportunity across the state. We have some of the worst disparities in the nation in terms of health disparities, educational disparities, wage gaps between our different economic classes and between people of majority race and other ethnicities. And we should be ashamed of that. That's not going to build the Minnesota of the future. We have to give everyone a chance.
The future is going to be much more colorful.
Absolutely. And do you know Minneapolis is no longer the most diverse city? I understand we're number 5 on the list with the new census data. And I think that will help us with the dialogue about that as well.
Worthington?
I'm not sure what who's all ahead of us. I know it's some suburbs and some out-of-state cities. I think we are the most diverse in our diversity. Breaking point. We're more like the United Nations, where some other places are sort of, you know, dominated by one
or like border towns.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Planning, feedback, complex system analysis are the kinds of things that get dumped when times get tight. Is that true?
I don't know that that's true. I actually think we try and step up more. We're partnering more with the university, and the university has been more open to that, I think, in terms of helping us analyze options and things like that. I think that when you have serious decisions to make about changing your service delivery, how to do more with less, that sort of thing, you do look a lot more at the research on best practices. You look a lot more at what other states have successfully done. You look at the outcomes of what we're doing. So I think it's a really thoughtful process.